Reality Check Inside America's Next Top Model is one of Netflix's latest docuseries, examining the cultural impact the show had on an entire generation. It features commentary from the people who made it possible. Tyra Banks, of course, Ken Mock, Jay Manuel, Miss J. Alexander, Nigel Barker, a former UPN president, and of course, former contestants. Much of the public conversation I've noticed has centered around one person. Tyra Banks. After all, she was the face, the creator, the host. In Reality Check, she also mentions doing a little bit of or participating in the editing process. She had her hands in a lot of the pots. But here's where I pause. While many people assume Tyra held all the power, I'm not entirely convinced it was that simple. And to be clear, this is not me being a Tyra apologist, nor is it an attempt to excuse harmful behavior. It is an attempt, however, to examine the full structure. Because while Tyra was undeniably powerful, she was still operating inside a larger machine. Respectfully, I would classify her as an important cog within that machine, but a cog nonetheless. Even Tyra was fired from her own show. There were executive producers, network executives, editors, advertisers, contracts, other hosts or judges, ratings demands. Power didn't just sit in one chair, it circulated. And when power circulates, so does responsibility. Contestants' trauma didn't just appear on screen. It was packaged, edited, and monetized. Their breakdowns became cliffhangers for the next episode. Their insecurities became the storylines. Their vulnerability was advertised as entertainment. Was this simply reality TV doing what reality TV does? Or was something more calculated happening? Should viewers have looked past the discomfort, the WTF moments? At what point should producers have intervened? Was there really one person at fault? Or was the harm systemic? America's Next Top Model ran from 2003 to 2018, but experienced a resurgence in viewership during the 2020 pandemic. This time, audiences were watching through a different lens, something Tyra herself acknowledges in the docuseries. They were naming the harm, calling out the absurdities, pointing out the toxicity that now feels blatantly obvious, but perhaps didn't then. So what changed? In today's episode of Rhetoric with Shakia, we're examining how entertainment profits from vulnerability, how trauma becomes content, and ultimately, who holds the responsibility. On its surface, America's Next Top Model felt radical. And it was supposed to. It platformed women who weren't being seen. It promised opportunity and access. For many viewers, especially young Black girls, plus-size women, queer women, visibility felt like progress. And that matters. But visibility and empowerment are not the same thing. And this show was supposed to be empowering. Visibility sounds like, here's this person who you can relate to or you can see yourself in. While empowerment requires agency, it requires protection, it requires care beyond performance. And once you examine what the show actually was, not what it promised to be, that's where the language of empowerment begins to fracture. Because what was marketed as an opportunity was also structured as elimination. And that tension, empowerment versus entertainment, is where the story shifts. So, what does it mean to claim disruption? That was one of the aims of the show, while reinforcing hierarchy. The docuseries revisits moments that once aired as mentorship, but now land differently. Take the makeovers, for example. They were framed as transformation, a rite of passage into the modeling industry. But contestants recall begging not to have their hair cut, crying in chairs, feeling stripped of their autonomy. In the documentary, former contestants describe how their resistance was edited into spectacle, turning genuine distress into dramatic television. Emotion became content. Then there was the infamous gap tooth storyline. Do you remember that one? One contestant was pressured to close her gap for commercial appeal. She was told it would limit her bookings. And yet cycles later, another contestant's gap was intentionally widened. So the issue wasn't about individuality, it was marketability, not just for the modeling industry, but for the show itself. These dramatic transformations created buzz. It got the people going. They sparked conversation and they drove ratings. Judging panels, once framed as tough love, now read as public exposure. Insecurities were dissected, tears replayed, silence was stretched for dramatic effect. This all made for great television. And when a young woman stands in front of a panel, knowing her dream and the changes she desperately wants for her life depend on pleasing them, the judges, is that feedback? Or is it coercion disguised as critique? Reality Check also revisits insensitive photos, moments that seemed perhaps edgy or creative, even awkward, but now feel, and we know, not even just feel, we know that they were deeply inappropriate. So when elimination is always looming, consent becomes complicated. Is it choice or compliance? Behind the scenes, producers and editors shaped heroes, villains, and redemption arcs. Editing didn't just construct episodes, it told us, the viewers, how to see these women, who to root for, who to mock, who not to trust, who was angry, or who to be angry at. The women weren't just learning the ins and outs of the modeling industry, and that's not all that was being filmed, although that was the aim, one of the aims of the show, for the women to go through that process, but for us as the viewers to see that process as well, to see what it was like or what it took to become a model. However, they were competing with each other and a narrative was being constructed around them. They were being narrativized. And when your breakdown increases ratings, when your insecurity becomes a teaser, and when your trauma becomes a cliffhanger, the line between storytelling and exploitation thins. Contestants describe isolation from family, sleep disruption, poor eating habits, and constant evaluation. Emotional volatility wasn't incidental. It was embedded in the format of the show. Pressure was framed as preparation. Humiliation was framed as resilience building. But if empowerment requires breakdowns for ratings, if mentorship includes public shaming, if vulnerability becomes currency, then empowerment becomes conditional. And conditional empowerment isn't revolutionary. It's not a disruption. It becomes leverage. The brand expanded. The franchise endured. But many contestants describe limited structural support once eliminated. Reflection does appear in the docuseries, and yet structural accountability seems less visible. If the structure was visible, why did it feel normal? Why did it feel okay? Part of the answer is timing. Early 2000s media normalized public critique. Think about the competition shows that were airing at that time. Harsh judging was entertainment currency. Reality TV trained audiences to interpret humiliation as growth. And we can add another layer, representation, complicated the critique. America's Next Top Model was marketed as inclusive, as groundbreaking. Seeing diverse women on mainstream television was supposed to feel revolutionary. Visibility can feel like liberation, even inside hierarchy. So we were watching diversity inside an existing system and calling it transformation. During the pandemic, audiences rewatched the show from a new vantage point. The structure hadn't changed, but we had. Cultural language evolved. Conversations around consent, mental health, and power evolved. Moments that once felt normal now felt cringy and uncomfortable. Were we unaware or just conditioned? In Reality Check, there's an implication that the audience played a role, that this is what viewers wanted. I believe Tyra said that. And maybe that's partially true, but that doesn't absolve the system. We say it was a different time. We say it was reality TV just being TV. But the truth is, the discomfort was always there. The crying was real, the humiliation was real, the power imbalance was real, and yet we watched. We talked about it. We quoted catchphrases. We turned moments of breakdowns into gifts. The show told us it was empowerment. But empowerment without protection isn't empowerment. It's just exposure. And when vulnerability becomes entertainment, when mentorship becomes performance, when trauma becomes the storyline, the machine doesn't run on one person. It runs on networks, on producers, on hosts, on advertisers, on judging panels, and yes, it runs on us. Because consumption is a form of participation. So the real question isn't just what Tyra did or what the producers allowed. The question is, if vulnerability becomes entertainment and empowerment becomes branding and we continue to consume it, then who exactly is ever truly held accountable? That's this week's episode of Rhetoric with Shakia. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to hear what your thoughts are about the documentary, what your thoughts are about accountability and about using trauma as a storyline and so forth. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you come back for the next one. But until then, bye for now.